Hello YouTube, Ben here from Sonic Safari. Today I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I'm going to do an Ableton Live tutorial. I normally do Logic tutorials, but I thought I'd mix it up a bit. And the reason I'm using Ableton Live here is what we're going to look at today is working with polymeters. And many people have heard of polyrhythms, but often what they think about when they talk about a polyrhythm is actually a polymeter. So there's a bit of confusion about these terms. And to be honest, for a long time I got this wrong myself. So my understanding here is if we look at the definition of a polymeter, it's basically where we've got different parts playing at different timings. Okay, so one might be in 4/4, one might be in 3/4. That's a polymeter. And the idea with this is that they will cycle in different ratios and eventually they'll meet up. So we get these interesting sort of overlapping parts. Now that's polymeter, not a polyrhythm. A polyrhythm is where the number of beats, we're actually trying to fit a different number of beats into the same amount of time. So rather than having one bar playing at 4/4 and one bar playing at 3/4, which as we can see here, this definition, for polymeter, it says the bar sizes differ, but the beats remain constant. So if you got 3/4 and 4/4, but they're playing at the same tempo, then they're still going to be joining up. They're still going to be linking up eventually. So a polyrhythm is where you actually try and fit a different number of notes into the same length. So you'd be playing, say, 4 against 3 polyrhythm. You'd be trying to fit 4 notes and 3 notes into the same amount of time and then playing them both at once. So you're actually stretching one of them out, and that is a little bit different. So today we're looking at polymeter, which is the idea of having different parts playing in different time signatures, basically. So I'm here in Ableton Live, and the great thing about Ableton Live's session view here is that we're working with these different clips here, and it's very easy to set these up to have a different meter. So notice if I right click here on my kick here and just say insert MIDI clip, notice that it's inserted a 1 bar MIDI clip. Now, right up here, I've got the signature. So by default, that's set to 4/4. Okay, so, you know, that is probably what 90% of all modern sort of Western music is in. Now, you notice that there's also a time signature up the top here, and this is the global time signature, and that's basically what's going to be in the other view, in the arrangement view. If I hit tab and jump over to the arrangement view, this is the time signature up here for the arrangement. And this is why a lot of other timeline based, you know, DAWs work like this, because there's only one global time signature. And that's why I picked Ableton over Logic for this, because in the session view, it's very easy to set up different parts at different meters. So for example, instead of having this clip playing at 4/4, I could come down here and set this to play at 3/4 simply by changing this value, right? So now this would be counting 3 notes to the bar. 1, 2, 3, and that would be 1 bar. Now notice, because I originally made this clip at 4/4, it's actually playing 1 bar and sort of 1 beat in 3/4. So if I shorten that to 1 bar in length, you can see we're counting 1, 2, 3 beats to the bar. And I could just crop that clip. Okay, so the interesting stuff happens when we play some stuff in one time signature and some stuff in another time signature. I'll just delete this clip because I've already made up some empty clips here playing at different time signatures. And I'm going to start off with a kick. We're going to create something, maybe how do you use this in practice? Well, you know, let's just have a look. So first things first, maybe I'll set this up with some toms. So if I insert, say, 1 MIDI clip here, and let's say this is in 4/4 by default. Okay, so if I was to put in some toms here, let's say I'll use these classic 808 toms maybe, or 606 toms here. So let's say I do something fairly simple here where I'm playing this low tom here once every 4 beats. Okay, so that would be if I turn on my metronome here so we can hear that. Okay, if I just play this back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's in 4/4. I'll just rename that 4/4 so we can see what's going on. Okay, what I might do is just duplicate this whole track. So I've got another instance here. And in this one, what I'll do is I will change this to a high tom. And I'll change the time signature to 3/4. This is, we'll call this a 3/4 polymeter. Now, this is a fairly common one. If I just shorten this so it's 1 bar long, remember now it's counting, 1, 2, 3. And in this case, I'll just crop that clip so we can see that a bit more easily. So in this case, if I was to stop this clip and play this clip, which I'll rename to 3/4 because it's in 3/4, we'll be counting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's hear what happens if we play these both together. Okay, so hopefully you can hear that. They started off, playing the same note at the start, but then quickly they sort of went out of phase with each other and started creating this interesting kind of a loop. And even just by having a single note and, then we start to get some more interesting patterns going on. This is a quick way to break out of loopitis. I'm sure you've all been there. You've all created an 8-bar loop or a 4-bar loop, and it sounds great, but then you're sort of just stuck in a loop and, you don't know where to go. So this is a great way to create a bit of variation so it's not so boring and doesn't just repeat so much, as you can create some things in a different meter, so we get these much longer, more interesting, evolving kind of loops. So I'll just delete these 2 clips. That was just to demonstrate, the basic concept. And let's actually try and write a house tune. So we're going to use some sort of standard sort of drum sounds for house and, a synth hit. So I'm going to start here with a kick drum. And most house is got a 4 on the floor kick. That almost defines what house is. So I'm not going to break that convention. We're going to stick with a 4x4 house kick. So if I come to this clip and I'm going to use this kick drum here, I'm just going to put in a beat in here for every beat. Our standard 4 on the floor kick. So let's just have a listen. Okay, great. Now, so that's going to actually hold things down. And to be honest, this whole thing's going to feel like it's in 4/4 because that kick's so sort of dominant and everyone's so used to having that meter. Notice that there's no accents here, so it's a little bit hard to hear if this is in 4/4. If this is in 3/4 or 2/4, it would sound exactly the same because it's just playing on every single beat. So, to be honest, we're just assuming it's in 4/4 because that's what we're used to. Anyway, let's try something else in another time signature over the top of this. Now, it doesn't always have to sound weird, and I guess part of the art of this is trying to get something that sounds cohesive and doesn't just sound like a bunch of random stuff. So you don't always have to pick really strange combinations like 7 and 15 or something weird like that. It can still sort of feel like something familiar, but have a little bit of variation. So for a clap, normally the clap in 4/4 would fall on the 2 and the 4. But in this case, I'm going to do this 6 and 4. So notice here I've got a clap, and here I've already created an empty MIDI clip in 6/4. So notice that the signature here is 6/4. So normally I would come here and put that clap. Now let's work out which clap you want to use. I'm going to use my classic 707 clap. Now, normally that would be a clap here on the 2 and on the 4. All right, if it was in 4/4. So I'll put another one here on the 4. But notice this is in 6/4, so there's another 2 beats here. Now, if I put in another one here on the 6. Now, if I was just to play this back, again, because there's no accents, it's pretty much going to sound like it's in 4/4. If I played the kick and this clap, it's going to sound kind of like your standard house beat. Let's have a listen. So it doesn't really sound any different from 4/4 because, again, it's just playing on every second beat, this clap. And obviously, 6 divides into 2 as well. So what I can do is maybe add a second clap here. So if I just copy out another clap here, and I'll maybe make that a little bit quieter. So it's your classic double clap. Now let's have a listen to that, just to add a little bit of subtle variation. But notice it's not quite cycling how you would normally do, say, a double clap every 8 bars or something like that, or every 8 beats. So it's familiar, it's not too weird, but it is still adding a bit of variation. Now let's do something a little bit more interesting with our toms. So I'm going to come up here to my toms, and again, I've already created a MIDI clip here in 6/8. So if I open this up, we can see the time signature I've set here to 6/8. Now this is counting 8 beats, not 4 beats. So when we're talking about a time signature like 4/4, or in this case 6/8, the second number is the type of beat it is, the number of divisions. So the first number is how many beats in a bar, and then the second number is what are the size of those beats. So if we're talking 4/4, we're talking there's 4 beats in a bar, and it's divided into quarter notes or crotchets. With 6/8, we're talking about 6 beats in the bar, and those are eighth notes or quavers. Okay, so instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, we're counting in eighths. So that'll be double the speed of quarter notes, eighth notes. So 1, 2, 3. So if that's 6/8, we're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, now that does kind of divide with our 4/4 in an interesting way. So if I come here to my toms, I'm going to use, I think I'm going to use my classic these ones here. And I'm going for a sort of classic tech house sort of thing where I've got just a high tom and a low tom, kind of doing a bit of just a repeating part. So I think that would go, if I'll just turn off the claps for a moment. So let's see, I'm going to put one high tom here on beat 3. Actually on the off beat. All right, and one here. Okay, so normally that would sort of just repeat dunk, 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 dunk. But I want to do something a little bit different here, so let's just copy these again. Okay, something like this. Let's have a listen. Whoops, hold down Option or Alt here to drag. And this one, because it's going off the end, I'll drag this back to the start. So I might put that on the 1 there. Okay, so you can hear that this is now doing an interesting sort of cycle where it's not always just looping every 1 bar. So now we're starting to get an interesting kind of mix here. So let's just play this all together. Okay, starting to sound like an interesting groove. Now, I'll get rid of the second tom that I duplicated. That was just for demonstration purposes before. Let's come to the hi-hat now. And again, I've created a hi-hat part here in 3/4. So what I'm going to do here is play these 3 here. I've got these 2 closed hi-hats and an open hi-hat, and I'm just going to cycle between them. I'm just going to do something like 1, 2, 3. Now, again, notice that this clip here is in 3/4. Okay, so we're counting 3 quarter notes to the beat. So rather than counting 1, 2, 3, 4, we're counting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So otherwise known as a waltz. Okay, so I'm going to select these 3 notes. And again, you can see because I've got 3 hi-hat parts, I'm actually just counting 1, 2, 3. Now these are not on the quarter notes. These are actually on the 16th notes. But I'm just going to repeat this pattern. So I'm just going to copy these 3, hold down Option or Alt, copy them out again, and copy them out again, and copy them out again. Okay, so now I've got this. Now this is making, for every beat, basically, I've got 3 of these. So counting, actually, that's not true, 4. 4 sets of 3, so there's 12 of them. Okay, so let's play this back. Okay, well that sounds okay. It's got a bit of a groove. Now, it could be interesting to delete some of these because it's sounding a little bit too constant. So maybe I'll just try deleting this. Now, here's another tip. If you, instead of just deleting something, you can use the 0 on your number pad, or you can right click and say deactivate. So that's 0. So if I tap 0, I could just mute that and have a listen. So without having to permanently delete it, I can just turn it off. That sounds cool. And maybe this one here too. I like that, so it's got a bit of space, can breathe a bit. Okay, great. So now we're getting somewhere. Okay, what I might do is put in a sort of synth hit now to add a bit of, some chords or some melody or something. So I'm going to come here to this synth, where I've just got this simple synth sound, and I'm going to come to this clip that I've already created, and this is in 12/8. So again, we're counting 8th notes, which are quavers, which are double the speed of quarter notes, and we're counting 12. So this is quite a large number. Now, this might seem like a bit of a weird time signature, but your classic 12-bar blues is in 12/8. So it's so that's like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. That would be 2 bunches of 6 or 12. So that's 12/8. Okay, so let's come here, and I'm going to put in some chords, and I'm just going to do this with the pen tool here for a moment. So I'll just put in some chords here. I'm going to just do a minor chord. So in A, so A, C, E, that's a minor chord. Let's have a listen. Now, because this is house, I might get a little bit more jazzy. I might add another couple of notes. All right, so I'm going to add a G, and I'm going to add a B. All right, so this will be a minor 9th. That sounds a bit more housey. So I'm going to copy this, and let's see. We'll just see where this might... I just want to repeat this kind of chord hit. Notice I've actually already got a delay on this. So if I look here on my B send, I've got this delay, which is just a sort of stereo ping pong delay. One's on 3 and one's on 2. Now, again, this is almost forming a bit of a polymeter itself, because one of my delays counting every 3 notes, it's repeating, and one of my delay is on 2. So again, we're getting this interesting 3 against 2 rhythm. So you could even write your actual musical parts in 4/4 and use things like delays or LFOs cycling in some strange sort of polymeters as well. So anyway, coming back to the part. So I'm just going to play this back and copy some of these notes, work out how I want these to repeat. Okay, that sounds good. I'm just going to maybe just copy this whole chord, paste that a few times. So I'm doing this on every 1 2 3 4, every 4 notes. Okay, no, actually, do this. Okay, now this, I might put one more note in here at the end, and I'll just go down a whole tone. Now that's going to make a G minor, and I actually want that to be a major, not a minor. So what I might do is find that note, and that is a D, that's the minor. So if I bring this up to a B instead of a B flat, that will be a major. So that's a major 9th. So let's have a listen. Okay, cool. So you can hear we're starting to get an interesting kind of groove out of these different polymeters all playing at different times. And it's just a bit more interesting than having everything always counting, 4/4. So having these kind of rigid loops that always join up and get repetitive. So hopefully that has given you some ideas how to break out of that sort of loopitis and get some ideas of moving forward and creating some interesting polymeters. Have fun.